question for you all. Does anyone know what the most common sexually transmitted disease around today is? Now, before you answer, I'll let you know it's probably not what you think. The most common sexually transmitted disease is the human papillomavirus, or HPV for short. According to the National Institute for Cancer, HPV is made up of 100 different types of viruses. It is called papillomavirus because it sometimes manifests itself in the form of warts. The biggest difference between this sexually transmitted disease and other sexually transmitted disease is it can be passed from skin-to-skin contact, not just sexual intercourse. That is what makes this virus such a tricky virus. There are many different strains of the HPV virus. The strain you are looking at in front of you is strain 1. It has manifested itself in the form of a plantar's wart, which appears on the bottom of your foot. There are many different types of strains, as I stated. HPV 2, 6, 11, and 16 are known to cause genital warts. HPV 16, 18, 36, and 57 lead to oral cancer. All of these strains are considered high risk. And again, as I mentioned, there are 100 different types of strains, so these are just a few. Because there are no obvious symptoms, sometimes this disease can go without being noticed and lie dormant for months or even years. The only way to discover if you have HPV many times is through routine testing. In women, the #1 test is a pap smear. During this routine test, if any abnormalities are found, then further testing is called for by the doctor. If they find it necessary, they will take the lesions and perform a biopsy or removal of the tissues and have it sent off to a pathologist to see if it's cancerous or non-cancerous. It is believed that HPV is responsible for 90% of all cases of cervical cancer. Between 10 and 12,000 women contract HPV each year. The number for women is substantially higher than for men. If you will, we're going to look at the back side of this chart. As you can see, cervical cancer had 11,150 new cases in 2007, according to the American Cancer Society. You will see also there were other types of cancer that HPV has began on the rise: vaginal, vulva, penile, anal, and oral cavity. All of these cancers have dramatically increased because of the HPV virus. Although there is no cure for HPV, there is hope. This hope is found in the form of a vaccine. The first vaccine is Gardasil, which was licensed by the FDA in 2006, followed by Cervarix, that was introduced by GlaxoSmithKline. There's considerable controversy between religious and conservative organizations over this vaccination. They believe that by lowering the risk of contracting HPV, that you are given a blank check, if you would, to young teenagers to have unprotected sex. The other problem that these groups have is by making it mandatory. They feel like you're taking the option away from parents and forcing this drug upon their children. Again, the reason that they feel like the drug should be passed, the vaccination should be mandatory, is because you don't necessarily have to have sexual intercourse to contract HPV, unlike many of the other sexually transmitted diseases. So you could actually have a young person that has not ever engaged in sex, but they end up with HPV. And it can lie dormant in their body for a month or up to a couple of years, and all of a sudden they begin to have problems and they might not know why. Again, as I stated, there are drawbacks to this vaccine. The first drawback is the vaccine does not protect against all strains of the virus. The second is this vaccine currently is simply preventative. If you already have HPV, it does nothing for destroying or curing the person who already has the strain living inside of them. The third is the cost. It is recommended that girls receive a series of 3 shots. Gardasil, the #1 vaccine, is $120 per dose, or $360 for the complete series of shots. Although there is still much controversy over whether it should be voluntary or mandatory, it has now become mandatory in the state of Texas. In February 2007, Governor Rick Perry signed an executive order making Gardasil the #1 mandatory vaccine for all girls entering the 6th grade who are between the ages of 11 and 12. The other problem that the conservative groups have is they don't feel that it should be a prerequisite for these girls going to school. Like other vaccinations, if your children don't have them, they can't attend school. And that's how they want to make this vaccine. If you do not have the young girls vaccinated, then they want to say that they cannot attend school until they are vaccinated, forcing many parents' hands who really don't want their daughters vaccinated. Although this disease is silent and not heard of very often, it is a very deadly disease and one that requires us to pay a lot of attention to. In my opinion, there is still much research that needs to be done before I would feel comfortable allowing my daughter to be vaccinated, because they simply just do not know enough about it yet. But again, the benefits do seem to outweigh the drawbacks.
Good.